This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for watching this week's NC Spin. We've got a really interesting show for you, beginning with the special elections in the 3rd and 9th congressional districts. We examine the candidates and discuss how they might instruct us for the 2020 races. The hot topic right now is that 3-day conference co-sponsored by Duke and UNC and the charges of anti-Semitism that arose from it, along with a possible congressional investigation. And of course, we always ask our panel to tell us something we don't know. Speaking of the panel, this week's panel includes Peg O'Connell, political analyst and healthcare consultant, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Chris Fitzsimon, director of the Newsroom, and Patrick Sebastian, political analyst and consultant. We'll begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
Our state has more than 300,000 with no options for health insurance. 63% are in working families, one illness away from disaster. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
Partners for Innovation in Healthcare. We're supporting common sense solutions for North Carolina's healthcare delivery system, promoting access, affordability, quality care, and innovation. Visit us on the web at pihc.info.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
More than 2 million North Carolinians, including 435,000 children, live in areas where they can't buy healthy food. We can do better than this. Learn how we can improve access to healthy food at ncallianceforhealth.org.
Production underwriting provided by the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Let's get to it. While most of us are enjoying warmer temperatures, voters in 2 of our state's congressional districts are warming up to some unusual special elections. Early voting ended Friday in the 3rd congressional district, and in the 9th congressional district, early voting has just begun. Meanwhile, the candidates are lining up, and we want our panel to preview these contests and tell us what we might expect. Patrick, Sebastian, I want to start with you. Both these elections seem to have one thing in common, and that is whoever wins this seat is going to have to turn around and run again in 2020. How does that change the strategy as far as a candidate is concerned?
Tom, none of the candidates are really thinking about that right now. Frankly, they don't have time to think about that right now. It is interesting, of course, in the House, unlike the Senate, once you get elected, you're pretty much raising money immediately. And now these guys, whoever wins these races, will be turning around the next day and starting to raise money again. Once again, yeah. And that's right in the middle of them being a freshman and going through orientation. These are mighty crowded races. I don't think the 3rd has ever seen this much money in it, and the 9th district is going to be just absolutely nuts in the general election.
Peg, one of the things, even if you don't live in these 2 congressional districts, I think that these 2 elections could be very instructive for us, because some people are saying this is really going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. Particularly on the Republican sides of these contests. Would you agree with that?
Well, you know, I think it could very well be, and I think we saw some of that in the last congressional election. And it's interesting, but you have, especially on the Republican side, some of the truly most conservatives are lining up saying, when I get to Washington, I will support Donald Trump. And so
I'll vote right with him.
Right,
yeah.
So people will have a choice. I think Patrick talks about this, the amount of money that's coming into these races, both from individual checks that are being written and the outside money that's coming in, is just remarkable.
I want to talk about that in a minute. Let's get over to the 3rd congressional district, Chris. A lot of threes. Third district, we got 3 women, 3 legislators, 3 doctors, and 3 Marines running in this contest. Any issues that have surfaced that are interesting?
Well, I think it depends on the who the individual candidates are. But you mentioned, is this a referendum on Trump? I actually don't think so. I think none of the candidates are going to run against Trump in the 3rd district. And I want to go back, if I could, to the first question. One of the things that makes it so interesting, there's so many candidates. There'll be a runoff. There's no question about that. This might be one of those times where whoever wins this election has a rematch in a year or in 2 years. I don't think either one of these districts will be settled in the next 2 elections.
John, Walter Jones was known to be an independent. He didn't tote anybody's party, carry anybody's water, so to speak. None of these candidates are expressing any of that on the Republican side, expressing that independence, are they?
No, they're not tying themselves to Walter Jones. They're tying themselves to the person that most of these voters know, which is Donald Trump. Now, most of the voters in this primary, in fact, in both of the primaries, are over the age of 50. In fact, the vast, vast majority are. Many of them have voted
and
for
Trump
Walter Jones.
The district by 60%.
You're right.
Yeah.
Many have voted for Walter Jones or Walter Jones Sr. before. So it's not as if these are unknown names. It's just the way they're playing these primaries out. The national story is much bigger than the local story.
All right.
Well, I think it's just as a point. The Democrats in the 3rd district are actually talking about they want to be like Walter Jones.
Well,
so that's interesting.
Well, I want to talk about that. Let's talk about the Democrats. We got 6 Democrats running here. Any front runners? Any names that are surfacing as sort of the ones to watch in that?
I think you should look at Alan Thomas and you should look at Richard Bew. Those are probably the candidates with the best chance of getting the nomination.
Alan Thomas should be strong, except Greenville's not the anchor of the district anymore. Pitt County used to be the anchor. It no longer is. It's really the 4th biggest county in the district now.
I would have said that was very clearly the case until this past Monday, Chris, when the state auditor released an audit about the Global Transpark, which Alan used to run.
Right.
Now, that audit, in fairness, never said that he did anything improper or that there was any mishandling of money or whatever like that. It just questioned the practices that went on with that. And just to finish this thought, I called up State Auditor Beth Wood because you got to admit, releasing this on Monday when the general election is going to be taking place in a week, it's questionable. She said, look, I got to tell you, I had no idea that there was an election that was going to be taking place
well, that
on
makes
next
me worried
Tuesday.
a little bit for another reason.
Well, no, she said, I don't live in that particular world. I didn't know that. But anyway, so far as it goes, how big a factor is this?
I don't know if there'll be enough money. The Democratic opponents of his in the primary will be able to use that. I do think you're right. It doesn't directly implicate him. I think that more likely, if he wins the nomination, the Republican candidate who's running against him will certainly mention that in the general election. But, the Global Transpark has had issues since it was created.
Yes.
And a lot of people are not big supporters of that.
I see this issue quite differently, Tom. I think that if the state auditor had delayed the release of the report until after the election, that would have been tampering with the election.
Good point. Beth told me, she said, I really did not know that this election was taking place, but even if I had known it, I would have released it last Monday
this is
anyway.
Information that is relevant to the election.
Well, not just that, but because of the time schedules that we normally follow in releasing audits. Okay, any other issues other than the Global Transpark issue, so far as Democrats are concerned?
Well, they are talking about how to challenge Trump. There's no question about it. They are going for the Democratic primary voter, which is a primary. In both parties, the primary voters are going to be more ideological, more sort of implacably partisan than the general election voter is concerned. I think Richard Bew is someone that has a chance. He's a retired colonel in the Marine Corps. He's raised a fair amount of money.
He's raised $124,000.
He has some endorsements. So I think this is an active race on the Democratic side. I think whoever wins will still have an uphill climb.
All right. So isn't the job here to get into the runoff? Isn't that really what everybody's doing? I mean, you're talking about endorsements. Alan Thomas, for instance, has had Jim Hunt's endorsement, Congressman G.K. Butterfield's endorsement. A lot of endorsements. We'll talk some about the Republicans in a minute. Isn't the primary job, Patrick, just to get into the runoff?
Well, the goal is to get to 30%. And I think it's going to be easier to get 30% threshold for the Democrats than the Republicans.
Do you really?
Yeah,
oh, gosh.
It's impossible for them.
That can get there.
Yeah.
I mean, you see this as being with 6 Democrats?
Right.
Somebody being able to get 30%?
Yes,
And I was
it is
looking
not
at-
for the Republicans.
I looked at the TV competitive just yesterday, and it's really a two-man race in the Democratic Party in that primary. So one of them could easily get 30%.
And who is that? Bew and Thomas?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's move over to the Republicans. Any front runners there that anybody wants to bring up?
Well, there are. It's difficult to distinguish I'd say I think the top 4 or 5 candidates are fairly obvious, but exactly picking out who's going to win I would be beyond me. But certainly Greg Murphy, the state representative and physician from the Pitt County.
Raised the most money so far.
Yes, but also competitive financially, either for the campaign or independent expenditure, would be Joan Perry, who's a pediatrician in Kinston and very popular among social conservatives and economic conservatives.
And she's got some sort of mainstream conservatives lining up behind
That's what
her.
I mean. It's both wings. And then you also have Celeste Cairns, who is a accountant. She's in Carteret County. So you've got the different counties represented. And then the other one I want to mention is Alan Rouse, who's a county commissioner in Lenoir County, also spent a lot of money and is financially competitive. And then the final one I'd put in there as a possible is Francis DeLuca. Even though he doesn't live in the district, he is spending a lot of money lately.
He's raised a lot of money. Yeah.
He's loaned himself some significant amount
Right,
of money.
but I was focused more on spending the money.
Peg, I want to
That's how you
get into
elected.
the issue of these, particularly these women, because there's several women's groups that have been involved in endorsing. I mean, for instance, we talked about Celeste Cairns. She's gotten $58,000 from the Club for Growth in independent expenditure money, $104,000 from Awake, Carolina. Joan Perry has gotten $60,000 from Women Speak Out, $165,000 for Winning for Women. It's a big push to put a woman Republican in the Congress because there are only 13 right now.
And that's exactly what these women's funding groups have been. I mean, and they're newer coming to the table than Emily's List and things that the Democrats have been doing for a couple of generations of elections. But their big push is we need Republican women in the United States Congress, and we realize we've got to spend money in order to do it. And so they're doing it. I mean, it's the playbook. It's the playbook Democrats have used for years.
All right, so John has listed some names. Any other names anybody else sees that we ought to be watching there? You got to bring up Jeff Moore because Jeff Moore worked for the McCrory administration.
Yep, he did. You have Jeff Moore's got a little bit of money. Keimer Clark and Carteret counties coming on with a couple 15-second ads. I think it's probably a 5 or 6 person race, but I just don't think there is a front runner at this point. I really don't. It's going to be about the runoff.
A newspaper reporter asked me to pick one. I said, boy, that's a crapshoot.
The couple of people who've already been elected to something have a slight advantage over people who've never been elected to anything
Well, a lot of them do.
before.
You got the mayor of New Bern.
Right.
You've got 3 legislators.
And so I think they've got a slight advantage. But
Look at the
enough.
county makeup, though, because people like Greg Murphy, they represent Pitt County, but that's only a small part of the district.
Exactly.
And
Good
then you
point.
have in Lenoir County, that's one of the smaller ones, and they have 3 candidates in Lenoir alone. So it's going to be...
Craven and Onslow, obviously big. Let's move over to the 9th, because some interesting stuff going on in the 9th. Now, only one Democrat running there, and so far as it goes, Dan McCready has already generated $1.6 million in funds. He's keeping his powder dry because
I think he will win without a runoff.
I do.
How brave.
Could I write that down as a prediction?
I'm just trying to increase my percentage of correct predictions.
There are 10 candidates in the Republican side. It's the biggest field they've had since the year 2012 when Robert Pittenger first was elected. Any particular candidates there that are standing out?
Well, you have Lee Brown, who's come on very strong, of course, with the realtors over $1 million behind her.
Yeah.
You have Dan Bishop, a state senator, has some money behind him, put a lot of his own money in. Then you have Matthew Ridenhour, former county commissioner, who's running as a Marine, trying to run against a Marine. And then you have Stoney Rushing.
Boss hog.
Yeah, Stoney
Rushing
in Union County, but he's got almost no money behind him, and I think he may be... He kind of came on strong. I don't think he might be left behind.
Well, the other challenge there is that Fern Schubert, who I don't think anybody believes, including Fern, believes is going to be nominated, but she's also on the ballot in Union County. Union County is one of the 2 counties with significant amounts of votes in it. So I think Patrick's right. If you combine the lack of resources behind Rushing and the somewhat split county vote in Union, I think right now one of those, either one of the 2 Mecklenburg district candidates, which would be Dan Bishop and Matthew Ridenhour, or Lee Thomas Brown, who is actually from Cabarrus County, I would would think
Yeah,
those
she
have a
doesn't live
somewhat
in
of
the
an
district.
edge.
Yeah, Peg, so far as it goes, let me talk about Dan Bishop. He's been known best as the primary sponsor of HB2. How much of an albatross, if any, will that be around his neck in a general election?
Well, I think in a general election it could become an issue, but I don't think it will be such an issue in the primary. And he's already said that they had a forum down there recently, the Young Republicans, and he said, you know, my past opponents, primary opponents, tried to use this against me. My general election opponents have tried to use it against me. He said, this story is done. I have a feeling this story will have a chapter 2 come Dan McCready's $1.5 million.
So far as Lee Brown is concerned, we talked about the fact that the national realtors have poured over $1 million into her campaign and as an independent expenditure. Of course, theoretically, she can't control what they say and are not supposed to be consulting her. How big a factor is
Well, it's a huge factor. I mean, money is a factor in a primary when there's a low turnout, when people are battling for name recognition. I think this is this is what makes her a strong contender. It's interesting, in the Raleigh world, people think Senator Bishop, I think, is the front runner because everybody knows him, but that's really may not be the case in the district because of that much money.
He's been on television already. He's got an ad on television and he's got clowns in the background. In which he's referring to Nancy
the Trump
Pelosi.
Staff? Oh, no, that's somebody else.
Yeah.
Well, one thing about HB2 real quick is that it's not a huge issue in the primary, but just remember, a Mecklenburg County Republican in Myers Park, South Charlotte, is a lot different than someone in Union County right now. And I talked to a Republican voter today that lives in South Charlotte and was saying, look, that's a turnoff for me. I'm going to vote in the primary, but I don't want to deal with this issue anymore.
Interesting.
And they don't want to deal with it in the general election.
Yeah, I think the general election, it will be a big issue.
Let's talk about Stoney Rushing. We jokingly refer to him as Boss Hogg. He owns a gun shop and so forth like that.
He dressed up as that
character.
Okay. Now, the deal here is that he endorsed Mark Harris, and in turn, Mark Harris has endorsed him. The polls show Mark Harris still has more favorable ratings among the voters in that district than anyone else.
Well, that would make sense.
So how big a factor is that going to help him?
I mean, he's run multiple times in that district or a version of that district and is well known. If Stoney Rushing were a somewhat different candidate, and he was the only candidate in Union County, I would think the combination of somewhat of a lift, I assume a net lift from Harris, plus Union having lots and lots of voters in it, and if he had resource, I think that he would be a real contender. I just don't think those things line up for Stoney Rushing.
And again, I think the big issue here is what do you got to do to get into the runoff? Because the runoff is pretty much assured in the Republican side of this, I think. Let's move on to our next topic. An event jointly sponsored by Duke and UNC has received criticism over claims it was anti-Semitic. The three-day conference titled Conflict Over Gaza, People, Politics, and Possibilities had a performance by a Palestinian rapper and cell phone videos captured strongly anti-Semitic comments. Peg O'Connell, this episode has provoked questions and reactions. Let's begin with the most obvious. We say we think college campuses should allow free speech from a wide variety of spectrums, but do we believe in free speech even when it's offensive?
Well, I believe in free speech even when it's offensive, and I can't tell you how many different offensive things are said every single day. But because of the nature of how we were set up, we have to let people talk. Good ideas, bad ideas, offensive ideas, charming ideas. As long as they don't move people to violence, they're only words. And if you don't like it, get up and walk out.
Congressman George Holding, Patrick, wants to open up congressional hearings on all of this because of the fact there were federal dollars involved. But that opens up some very obvious questions. Does that mean that federal dollars can only sponsor events in which speakers that you favor their line of thought? Don't you think?
When a school itself is going to sponsor a speaker, you have got to walk a tightrope, and it seems like these schools are not at times. And look, if you look at conservatives that come on campus, they usually have to pay their own way, and a lot of times they get shouted down, and oftentimes have to have security.
And that should never happen.
It should never happen. You're exactly right. I liked as much speech as possible. I think it is a problem what the man is saying. What scares me more than anything is this is getting mainstream. This anti-Semitism is getting mainstream on college campuses and beyond. And that
Chris,
troubles
doesn't this
me.
kind of remind you? I mean, unfortunately, both of us, I think, were around pretty well. You may have been a little younger than I. Back in 1963, the speaker ban law.
Third grade in 1963.
Were you really?
I was not there. Let's put it that way.
Well, I remember the speaker ban law in 1963, in which the legislature, in the cloak of dark, passed a law. John, do you remember this?
Of course I do.
Of course. passed
have a
a
time
law
machine.
saying that anybody that was a communist, anybody that had ever taken the Fifth Amendment when questioned about Congress, a communist, anybody who'd ever advocated overthrowing the government could not speak on a college campus. Well, the thing passed in '63. In '68, a three-judge panel overturned it, saying it was unconstitutional. It wasn't repealed until '95. But doesn't this have some overtones similar to this?
It's exactly the same thing. I mean, my husband Jack is of a generation that when he went to Carolina in the 50s, he said the first thing he ever heard at one of those speeches was he heard a Republican for the first time in his life. And that was amazing
What
to
a
him.
sheltered life that man had lived.
No, he was from Eastern North Carolina. And then he said, and I heard communist. And I heard, and that's what we need. We need discourse. I mean, we don't need so much shouting, but we do need discourse. What that guy said in that video was gross.
That song, yes.
But
Well,
then
okay.
turn it off, walk out.
We had a comment on this last week on our show, on the Tell Us Something We Don't Know segment. One of our viewers got in touch with me and said, hey, she was offended by the comment that was made on our show. She had attended the full day, Saturday, of the event, and she said she found that it wasn't an Israel bashing event as it had been portrayed, perhaps. The speakers were articulate, they were intelligent, they were credible, and that there was some criticism of Israel, but there was also some criticism of Palestine. So far as it goes, isn't that what you want
Of course you want an exchange of views. I assume there was some substantive content, but the organizers of this event made a colossal error. They invited this guy. They knew pretty much what he was going to do. No one that I'm aware of has said anything related to this dispute that this person should not be allowed to come on campus.
And you wrote a very good column about this. Let me give you just a few seconds on that.
Well, there's a distinction between banning someone from campus, which you shouldn't do. They shouldn't do, and even in this case, this guy's a moron, but let him talk. The dispute is really about who should sponsor it and who knew what was going on. The School of Law, the School of Government, a number of other departments, including the administrators, were listed as sponsors of the event. They had no idea what they were signing up for. They're demanding their money back, and they should.
Chris, anything going to happen from this?
Oh, I think we'll continue to debate this. But remember, we're living in an era, literally, where we have a president of the United States who said there are good people on both sides, and one side was the Klan and Nazis. So put it all in perspective about our culture and what's happening. It's worth thinking about.
I want to move to Tell Us Something We Don't Know, and I need to begin this segment with a correction. On last week's show, the legislature was urged to restore health insurance benefits for state retirees. Treasurer Dale Falwell and a number of others have gotten in touch with me over the past week to make sure we get this information correct. Current state employees are entitled to health insurance benefits upon retirement based on a formula that's already been adopted. Employees hired after 2021, state employees, will no longer be entitled to health insurance benefits upon retirement. I hope this clarifies this important point. Tell us something we don't know. Peg O'Connell.
So I got something in my inbox right before I came over here that on Monday at 11 o'clock, the sheriff of Alamance County, Terry Johnson, the Reverend Gilbert Parker, and one of my favorite people, George Little, are going to have a news conference in which they will announce their support for the Republican solution for closing the coverage gap.
Interesting. John Hood. 2 minutes. Tell us something we don't know.
All right. Well, there's national polling on governors that happens every few weeks. And right now, the top 10 governors in job approval rating are Republicans around the country. 8 of the 10 least popular governors are Democrats. Where is Roy Cooper? He's right in the middle. He is quite smack dab in the middle of the national polling on governors.
So what does that say to you?
He's about average.
Okay. Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
One of the more bizarre things that happened in politics recently, I thought, was Richard Burr's answer about why he didn't, why he went as a gang of 8, as it briefed on the intelligence of the Mueller investigation, why he went to the White House and told them who were they investigating. It was mentioned in the Mueller report. It was testified under oath by the White House counsel. Burr says he doesn't remember or doesn't recall, which is pretty shocking that you don't recall telling the White House who the FBI is investigating.
Isn't that always the standard answer?
That's
I
pretty
can't
shocking.
remember that. Anyway, Patrick, tell us something we don't know.
So there's 2 Democrats that are, one's in elective office and one is running for office that I guess don't like what they're doing already.
Is this a bar joke or are we getting ready to go? Go ahead.
You have Rachel Hunt Neisner, apparently, and Dan McCready are really eyeing the Senate race. in a primary, and that's been a very quiet primary so far, but it's my understanding that Rachel Hunt's actually been up to D.C. to get recruited and is being pushed by Planned
Somebody
Parenthood.
said it didn't make any difference who won this 9th district race because Congressman Robert Pittenger was going to run again in 2020 anyway. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter and get our feedback. Be sure to catch NC Spin on Facebook or NC Spin on the Web. Until next week, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
The state has more than 300,000 with no options for health insurance. 63% are in working families, one illness away from disaster. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
Partners for Innovation in Healthcare. We're supporting common sense solutions for North Carolina's healthcare delivery system, promoting access, affordability, quality care, and innovation. Visit us on the web at pihc.info.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
More than 2 million North Carolinians, including 435,000 children, live in areas where they can't buy healthy food. We can do better than this. Learn how we can improve access to healthy food at ncallianceforhealth.org.
Production underwriting provided by the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.